Earlier this year, I did a video where I challenged myself to see how much of Banjo-Kazooie I could beat without Kazooie. And with the recent release of Banjo Tooie on the Switch, I felt it was only right to do the same challenge for Banjo Tooie. Now, let's be real, we all know it's not possible to beat Banjo Tooie without Kazooie. Because without Kazooie, that means no flying, no shooting eggs, no hatching eggs, no beak busting, no beak barging, no backflipping, and most importantly, no talon trotting, which without makes getting around these huge worlds so much more painful. Beating Banjo Tooie means beating the Hague 1 battle, which requires using eggs. So instead of asking, is it possible to beat Banjo Tooie without Kazooie, I wanted to know, what is the least amount of times Kazooie has to be used to beat the game? And today, dear viewer, that's exactly what we're going to find out. But first, I want to quickly say, if you enjoy the type of videos Dan and I post on this channel, then we'd really appreciate if you subscribed if you haven't already. Now, on with the video. As we start our journey in Spiral Mountain, let's go through some ground rules. First, I will not be doing any crazy skips or glitches, like bit clipping. For example, there is a way to skip the 70 Jiggy door and clip into the Hague 1 fight, the final battle of the game. I probably couldn't pull off the skip anyways, but I wanted to see how little Kazooie needed to be used playing the game without these glitches, and by being creative to get around these obstacles. The other rules I will discuss as we get to, which takes us to the first Klungo fight. There are a couple of ways to defeat Klungo. One of course is shooting eggs, and for each egg shot I will count that as using Kazooie. So if I need to shoot 3 eggs for example, that will count as using Kazooie 3 times. But the other way to defeat Klungo is by using the roll attack, which may be controversial to some of you viewers, as when you roll in Banjo Tooie, Kazooie pops out of the backpack and covers Banjo. But the way I and IGN see it, this move doesn't involve Kazooie. It's more of an aesthetic thing, so I won't be counting the roll attack as using Kazooie. With Klungo defeated, we make our way to Jinjo Village, visit King Jingling to collect our first Jiggy, visit Master Jiggy Wiggy, and unlock the first world. Right away to the right of the world entrance is a body of water with a red Jinjo in it, which as Banjo and Kazooie would involve swimming down to grab it. Diving down into the water, however, involves Kazooie using her wings to push down. From there, you can just swim as Banjo, which of course is a lot slower compared to using Kazooie's wings, but anytime I dive down into a body of water, I will count that as using Kazooie. But we don't want to use Kazooie, so instead of swimming down, we can just use the Golden Goliath to grab it. Also, I didn't know this, but the Jinjo colors are random in Banjo Tooie because the Jinjos are distributed randomly throughout the game. This means that the same color Jinjo won't be in the same place each time you play. So unfortunately, that means there is some RNG in this challenge. That's because once you collect all the Jinjos in a specific color family, you get a Jiggy. But each family has a different number of Jinjos in it, the lowest being 1 and the highest being 9. So ideally, I want to collect the Jinjos with smaller families, like the whites, oranges, and yellows. I also grabbed the yellow Jinjo on the bridge to Bovina's Field, and another red Jinjo in Targasan's Temple. There was also another yellow Jinjo in Jade Snake Grove above Jamjar's Hatch. However, this one was a bit harder to reach. I couldn't reach the ledge with just Banjo, so I tried to bait this enemy closer to the wall so I could jump on it and hope that the damage I take is enough to give me the height to reach the ledge. But the enemy wouldn't come close enough, likely because of Jamjar's Hatch. But I later learned you can just use the Golden Goliath to kick the Jinjo instead to collect it. As for the Jiggies, without Kazooie, I was able to collect the Jiggy which requires using the Golden Goliath to walk through the swamp, and the Jiggy from winning the Mayan Kickball Tournament as Stony Banjo. I was also able to collect the Jiggy on top of the highest point of the MayaTem Temple. Getting to this Jiggy involves walking up some steep steps that you would need to talon trot to get up to, unless you just fly to the Jiggy. Both would involve using Kazooie. So instead, I just jump, roll, and then jump again as Banjo, which is enough to get up to this Jiggy. This one might be controversial, but I'm also counting the Jiggy collected in Targasan's slightly sacred chamber as one that doesn't require Kazooie. The only prerequisite into getting into this chamber is learning the Breagle Blaster move, where Banjo automatically holds Kazooie like a shotgun whenever entering a first-person orientated location, such as Targasan's chamber. But for this Jiggy, you don't need to use Kazooie. You just need to collect 10 totems, which you can do as Banjo alone. Sure, Banjo is holding Kazooie, but you don't need to fire any eggs. And I don't see the difference between Kazooie being held in Banjo's hands and being held in his backpack. But yeah, let me know if you think this counts or not. I was hoping I could collect the Jiggy from saving Bovina's farm by getting creative and using the Golden Goliath, or even Mumbo to kill the mosquitoes. Globbles is apparently their name, but I had no luck with that. And while I could get up to the waiting boots in the prison compound with just Banjo, using the boots would mean using Kazooie to get to the other side of the sea of quicksand. And you need to use the boots because if you take damage in the quicksand, you are thrown to the side closest to the prison. There was no other Jiggy I could collect with using Kazooie in some capacity, but at this point I had 5 Jiggies, enough to unlock the next world, Glitter Gulch Mine. So I decided to just head there. I was also leaving with 100 notes, which is important to note, no pun intended, since you need to collect notes to learn moves in the game. Time to get down and dirty in Glitter Gulch Mine, another world where many Jiggies require the use of Kazooie in some capacity. But I did manage to get 3 Jiggies here without Kazooie. I collected the Jiggy from navigating the generator room, which is pretty easy to navigate without firing fire eggs into the generators. And for the parts with big gaps, Banjo's roll and jump was enough to reach the other side. The Jiggy at the end was floating above, which did concern me, but I was able to jump and get the height needed to grab it with just Banjo. I was also able to grab the Waterfall Cavern Jiggy, which I was surprised about. Typically, this Jiggy requires the use of the turbo trainers to reach in time, but that would mean using Kazooie. Instead, I just ran like the wind, swimming and jumping downstream and rolling to get through the gate before it closed with 2 seconds to spare. I also got a Jiggy from collecting the white Jinjo, as there's only one Jinjo in the white family, just a single bachelor in his bachelor pad. The Jiggy from the crushing shed I thought for sure I'd be able to get, but riding the boulder that Mumbo levitates into the shed involves hitting a switch that can't be activated from just rolling. I'd have to beak barge to activate the switch, which means using Kazooie. And then I tried desperately to reach Wumba's tent on the mountain of glittering gems with just Banjo. There is a smaller mountain of gems close by that has a globo on it, which I was able to get to with just Banjo by jumping, rolling, and then jumping again. But Wumba's tent is on a higher mountain, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get up it. And there's no ledges or cliffs around I could jump from. Getting into Wumba's tent means transforming into the detonator, which can unlock a lot more areas in the world and would allow us to free Canary Mary, another Jiggy that wouldn't require using Kazooie. I probably tried for a good 40 minutes before accepting that getting up this mountain without Talon Trot just isn't possible. So I left Glitter Gulch Mine with 155 notes and 8 Jiggies, just enough to unlock Witchy World. The only problem is the entrance to Witchy World is in Pine Grove, which requires shooting a fire egg at a target to gain access to, making it the first time we had to use Kazooie. The first Jiggy I went for in Witchy World, and one I thought for sure I wouldn't need Kazooie, was the Jiggy floating over the diving board. All you need to do is climb the tall ladder, make your way across a very narrow platform, and jump to get the Jiggy. Except, Banjo wasn't reaching the Jiggy. I then thought maybe rolling and jumping would give me the height needed to grab it, but no matter what I did, I just could not grab it. I would have to use Kazooie and Badflip to grab it. And given I would need 6 more Jiggies to unlock Jolly Roger's Lagoon, I had to start using Kazooie to collect Jiggies. And at least with this Jiggy, I'd only need to use Kazooie once. I could also collect the notes in the pool from just falling into the pool. Next, I want to reach Wumba as I will need to transform into the van to access certain areas, including Mumbo, which is needed to collect more Jiggies. Wumba's tent is high up though, but also somewhat close to the cliff her tent was on is the tall wooden gondola platform, or whatever this is called. I tried over and over to roll and long jump to reach the cliff where Wumba's tent was on, but after countless times I accepted I would need to use Kazooie to backflip, not just once, but twice. But it was needed because as a van, I can now pay for attractions and reach Mumbo, who is needed to power up a lot of the rides in the park. This meant I was able to collect the Jiggy from winning the Dodgems Challenge, and I was able to collect the Jiggy from climbing the stars of the Star Spinner. Doing this with Kazooie is easy, but without Kazooie, it was tricky. But all I needed to do was time when the spinning moon would rotate up so that I wouldn't fall off. At this point, I needed 3 more Jiggies to unlock Jolly Roger's Lagoon. I decided while on the Dodgem Dome, which you can climb up on this pole with Banjo, that I would use Talon Trot to grab the yellow Jinjo. The Jinjo was too far to reach with just Banjo alone, and I really wanted this Jinjo because it completes the yellow family and gives me a Jiggy. After this, I decided to go back to Glitter Gulch Mine and accept that I would need to Talon Trot up to Wumba's tent so that I can transform into the detonator and set Canary Mary free. That way, I can race her and get another Jiggy. I also used Beak Barge to activate the grinder to collect the Jiggy from the boulder. I now had enough Jiggies to unlock my favorite world, Jolly Roger's Lagoon. But knowing that I would need 20 Jiggies to unlock the next world after, my least favorite world, I figured I'd grab some less complicated Jiggies before moving on. These Jiggies did, however, require Kazooie, but not as much as others. I used the Bill Drill move to break the boulder in the prison compound so that I could get the Jiggy from reuniting Dilberta and Bullion Bill. I also collected the Jiggy on the other side of the quicksand in the prison compound by using the wading boots. Ah, Jolly Roger's Lagoon, home to the only gay bar. I also made a video on this if you want to check that out, but I don't recommend it. First, to get to Jolly Roger's Lagoon, I had to use the split pad in the plateau and use Kazooie to unlock the door leading to Cliff Top, where the entrance to the world is. I quickly got to work collecting notes and doubloons, Jolly Roger's Lagoon's currency, and even managed to jump out of the water with Banjo to grab the wedge and grab my 3rd red Jinjo. A Jinjo you would typically grab using the turbo trainers. From there, I get Mumbo and use his magic to provide so much oxygen to the water that we can now breathe underwater. We have to use Kazooie to dive into the water, but from there can just use Banjo to slowly swim around Atlantis. In the Electric's Eel's lair, I learned the Talon Torpedo from Jam Jars, a very important move for this world, and then realized I need to dive back underwater to get out, which would be using Kazooie again. So instead, I just save and quit and use the warp pad in the town square to warp back to Atlantis, avoiding any need for diving. I'll be using this strategy for any similar situations. Next, I make my way to Wumba's tent so I can transform into the submarine, except there's one problem. Wumba's tent is partially submerged underwater. Getting into Wumba's tent is no problem. The problem is once you enter Wumba's tent, you are forced back to the surface, and would need to use Kazooie to dive back underwater to get into the pond where you would transform. But I wasn't cool with that. I decided I would climb this wooden pole and jump from above, which was enough gravity to hit the pond and trigger the transformation, saving us on another Kazooie use. As the submarine, I'm able to grab the Jiggy from defeating Lord Wu Fak Bak, not sure if I pronounced that right, which you can also do as Banjo Kazooie with Sub-Aqua A-Gaming, but I have no idea why you would, as well as the Jiggy from winning the mine shooting game. I also collect the Easy Jiggy from torpedoing the Sea Me Fish, though this one required Kazooie. And I also collected my 4th red jinjo. I needed one more Jiggy to unlock Terrydactyland, but most of the Jiggy still available would require using Kazooie at least twice. And so I decided to go back to MayaTem Temple and steal the Jiggy from Slumber, which unfortunately required talent-trotting up the Code Room Pyramid and then backflipping to reach the one ledge. With that, I had 365 notes and enough Jiggies collected to unlock Terrydactyland, where I learned I need 8 more Jiggies to unlock the next world. Seeing this concerned me, and after some research, it was in this moment I learned I would ultimately need 70 Jiggies out of 100 to reach the Hague 1 fight. If I was going to pull this off, I was going to have to use Kazooie more than I wanted. So, going forward in this video, I will start discussing all the Jiggies I collected in a specific world and then move on to the next world, instead of going back and forth like Banjo Tooie loves to do. Seriously, backtrack and go I went back and collected the Jiggy hitting the pillars here to knock down the Jiggy. I had to build drill to gain access to the area, but from there I could just roll into the pillars to knock the Jiggy down. I also collected the Jiggy from shooting the 4 mosquitoes with eggs, which seems like using Kazooie a lot for one Jiggy, but it was less than the Target Stand's really sacred chamber Jiggy and the Jiggy from retrieving the stolen treasure, both of which involve shooting more than 4 eggs. Prior to returning to Glitter Gulch Mine, I had unlocked the Spring Step Shoes in Terrydactyland, which did require the use of 1 backflip. But with it unlocked, I could now use the shoes to gain access to the Jiggy behind the waterfall. I also collected the Jiggy in the Power Hut basement. I didn't turn the power on, but had to build drill 2 boulders to get access to the hut. I also collected the Jiggy in the underground pipe maze, where Kazooie was used to dive underwater, but from there just used Banjo to swim. Luckily the maze wasn't too long, and I could use Banjo to reach the Jiggy before drowning. And then there was also the Jiggy from defeating Old King Cole, where I had to use 10 grenade eggs, which obviously is a lot for one Jiggy, but grenade eggs are the strongest eggs in the game, so I saved on eggs by using those. And more importantly, Old King Cole needs to be defeated to gain access to the train, which is needed for other Jiggies, in addition to accessing Grunty Industries. Prior to coming back to Witchy World, I also learned the Taxi Pack move in Terrydactyland, which does not involve Kazooie at all. I completely forgot as Banjo you can jump much higher, so I thought I was being smart by having this enemy attack me and push me onto the ledge instead. Either way, I thought it was cool, so I wanted to show it in the video. With the Taxi Pack move, I can now round up the Boggy Children, as Taxi Pack is needed to carry the bigger child, but before he can be carried, he requires a hamburger, which unfortunately means using the spring jump pad. The one child just requires being hit, which you can do by rolling, and the other child just wants fries, which you can get without Kazooie. And then I ended up collecting all the remaining Jiggies except for 1, which include the Jiggy from ringing the Cactus of Strength, which required using Kazooie 3 times, the Jiggy on top the spiral slide in the Inferno, which required Kazooie running up the hill and then using the spring jump pad, the 2 Jiggies from the minigames in the Crazy Castle, which required firing a grenade egg to access the pump room, both Kazooie and Banjo to activate the switches, then Kazooie for both minigames, but then to also spring jump onto the top of the Crazy Castle and backflipping to reach the 2 Jiggies. Also, for any minigames that involve firing eggs, I'm only counting that as using Kazooie once, as it's way too hard to keep track of how many eggs are fired. And while we're on the topic, I also collected the Jiggy from riding the Saucer Peril, potentially the most annoying minigame in the game, and one that involved using Kazooie quite a bit. I had to use Kazooie to backflip onto this ledge so that I could activate the switch, then to flutter to the conduit to get to the saucer, beak barge to open the gate for the saucer to enter, then of course to play the minigame as it involves firing eggs, but before all that, had to use Kazooie to fire a grenade egg to gain access to Area 51, as this is where Mumbo powers up the Saucer Peril. I also used a grenade egg to free Gulby to set up for another Jiggy in Hailfire Peaks. Back in Jolly Roger's Lagoon, I had to use Kazooie 3 times to get the Jiggy from hatching Tip Top's egg, as I needed to use a grenade to break the chest monument thing in the town square, a grenade to blow up the hole on Mumbo's, and then Kazooie to hatch the egg. Hatching is a move learned in Terrydactyland, which required the use of spring shoes, and then Kazooie to learn the move. I had to use Kazooie 5 times to get the UFO back up and running, as it requires Kazooie's Talent Torpedo to access the UFO, and then 4 ice eggs. This is an important Jiggy to collect, as it must be earned in order to earn another in Hailfire Peaks. And then I had to use 5 grenade eggs to gain access to the big fish and free Mary Maggie Malpass, where I also collected the 5th red jinjo. I was really hoping I could just blow up the 1 tooth and gain access, and despite clipping right through the big fish, I just couldn't gain access unless all 5 teeth were blown up. only after learning the glide move in Hailfire Peaks, which I will talk more about later, I used a grenade egg to blow up this TNT, and then used Kazooie to glide to the Jiggy. And only after visiting Cuckooland and Hailfire Peaks to cool the water supply, I had to use Kazooie to flutter over to the pipe, bill drill to get into the pipe, backflip to get over a pipe, and then beak barge to activate the switch to clean the water. I thought I could avoid using two of Kazooie's actions here by using the split pad and just using Banjo, as he can reach the pipe on his own and likely can get over one of the big pipes inside. But going into the pipe counts as going into a different world, and you can't do that when Banjo and Kazooie are separated. And the last Jiggy, and one I thought I would need to use Kazooie a lot more, is the Jiggy bought at Pano's for 20 doubloons. But I only needed to use Kazooie once. Scattered around Jolly Roger's Lagoon are these coins, and while some are out in the open, some are buried under dirt that requires bill drilling, or up in this high alcove that typically requires bill drilling the dirt here to reveal the spring jump pad to use to get access. However, Banjo is pretty powerful without Kazooie in his backpack. So powerful that he can jump, use his backpack spin attack, and then jump again to reach new heights and distances. And by doing just that, you can reach the alcove from jumping from the ledge where Mumbo's is. In the end, I only needed to bill drill one dirt hill. Next is Terrydactyland, one of the worst worlds in the game in my opinion. Getting to this world meant diving underwater in Pine Grove and using the talent torpedo to access the wasteland. Here are the Jiggies I collected. The Jiggy that involves transforming to the baby T-Rex and roaring, the one from defeating Terry, which required the springy step shoes to get to, and 8 grenade eggs to defeat. This is why I've been avoiding boss battles in this challenge, because they typically require a lot of grenade eggs. But defeating Terry also means collecting the easy Jiggy under Terry's nest, which requires 1 bill drill. The Jiggy from defeating the Rocknut tribe, which required 5 Clockwork Kazooie eggs. I used Kazooie to fly to the rock that triggers Champa swallowing you, then used Kazooie to beat the minigame in its stomach. Collected the Jiggy by getting past the stopping planes, as this is a job for Banjo and his snooze pack move, though I guess this counts as a Hailfire Peak Jiggy. However, collecting the Jiggy ultimately means using Kazooie to activate one of the switches. I did save on using ice eggs on my way to the stopping planes though, as instead of using them to take out the fires, I just walked around them and then jumped into the fire to get to the other side, taking damage but avoiding falling to my death. And then I collected one of the most annoying and time-consuming Jiggies in the game, the one you get from helping Sprotty with her kids. I would have skipped this Jiggy, however, it only required using Kazooie twice. Actually 3 times, since I needed to backflip to reach the Clifftop train station switch. Once to free the missing dinosaur using a grenade egg, and another to bill drill the boulder, revealing the Mumbo pad so that he can use his powers to help the tiny dinosaur. And then I eventually collected the Jiggy from getting Dippy some water, one that required waiting until Cloud Cuckooland, and one that required Kazooie to dive underwater and then to use the talent torpedo to break the rock holding Dippy's water supply. Grunty Industries is the only other world that could compete against Terrydactyland for the title of the worst world, and one I collected the least Jiggies in. To reach the world, I had to use the springy step shoes to reach Quagmire, where the Grunty Industries world entrance is. Once inside, I realized I didn't have enough notes to learn 2 moves, one of which is the important Banjo move, the Snooze Pack. So I had to go back and target 2 treble clefs, which are worth 20 notes each. But before that, I had to use Kazooie to open the entrance gate. I collected the one in the red Jinjo house in Jinjo Village, which required a backflip, and I collected the one in the water here in Glitter Gulch Mine, which required diving. While in the area, I also decided to use a Clockwork Kazooie egg to collect the orange Jinjo in the water tower, as it was the last orange Jinjo, and collecting it meant I received another Jiggy. Back at Grunty's, I collected the Trash Compactor Jiggy, which only requires Banjo and his Snooze Pack. Once I learned the Sack Pack, a Banjo exclusive move in Cloud Cuckooland, I came back and collected the Jiggy on the other side of the toxic waste. I collected the Jiggy inside the warehouse on the rooftop of the building, which required flying and then smashing a clear window. I tried my best to reach the Jiggy in the boxes without Kazooie, but unfortunately it doesn't seem possible. I also collected the Jiggy from washing the rabbit workers' clothes, which requires transforming into a washing machine. A homage to Banjo-Kazooie, and one I also made a video on beating the game as, if you want to watch that video as well. But to get to Wamba to transform, I had to use the claw clamor boots and then the spring jump pad to reach the 2nd floor. But getting this Jiggy also required flying, and I made sure to grab the treble clef here, and then fire an egg to break the glass window here. I then had to bill drill 4 times and screw a crate to reach one of the rabbits, and needed to use the claw clamor boots to unlock an air duct to reach another rabbit. The last Jiggy I collected was the one from packing the Twinklies in the boiler plant. But before I talk about that Jiggy, I want to first talk about getting to the boiler plant. The boiler plant is on the 3rd floor, and that would mean using the claw clamor boots to get onto this higher ledge, which you can just roll and jump over to here to avoid backflipping to grab the ledge. However, we can avoid using Kazooie by transforming to the washing machine and going directly to the 3rd floor, and then have enemies hit us to give us a boost over boxes that are otherwise too high for the washing machine to jump over. By using the same strategy, we can get up on this ledge in front of Mumbo's and activate the warp pad. We can't use the warp pad as a washing machine, but with it activated, we can just warp from the 2nd floor as Banjo and Kazooie. I was feeling excited about this, so excited that I thought maybe I could pull off collecting this Twinkly's Jiggy not having to use Kazooie. Banjo can get to the boiler plant without Kazooie, as he can jump across and up the boxes to get there, but beating the minigame as just Banjo is extremely hard. He's just too slow, and for this minigame you can't just collect the Twinklies, you have to drop them off at their stations, and the more you collect, the slower you are. There is some luck involved, as in some attempts I was lucky that more blues would pop up near me, but it was never enough, and after so many tries, I accepted I would have to use Kazooie to beat the minigame. Welcome to where fire meets ice and back to where the worlds get good again. Surprisingly, there were a lot of areas I could explore with just Banjo, which was good, because it allowed me to collect enough notes to learn the Shack Pack. And with that came an easy Jiggy, as I was now able to collect the fish from the pool of hot water and bring back to feed Boggy. I also collected the Jiggy from inside the volcano by just rolling and jumping from each platform, and the Jiggy from activating the oil drill, which involves transforming into a snowball and using Banjo's Snack Pack move. Every other Jiggy involved Kazooie in some capacity. I had to use a grenade egg to connect Hailfire Peaks to Mayhem Temple to get the Jiggy from the kickball tournament, had to use 3 fire eggs to warm up Saberman, had to use Kazooie to fly or use the claw clamor boots to reach Gobi in the fire side train station, and then again to build drill on Gobi to cool down the train and collect the Jiggy in the icy side train station. And then there's the Jiggy from helping the aliens kids. The 2 kids can be helped without Kazooie, but of course there has to be one kid who is high up and needs Kazooie to sit on to warm up to help. And that requires gliding from this area where you learn how to glide, and then using the hatch move. But getting to Jam Jars to learn glide typically involves using Talon Trot to go up the icy hills in Icicle Grotto and using the spring pads to get onto higher ledges. But this can all be done without Kazooie. By using the split pad and taking Banjo into the Icicle Grotto alone, Banjo is able to jump his way up the icy hills. When it comes to getting onto the higher ledges, you can use the nearby icicles for some extra height, and then just jump, spin attack, and jump again to get onto the ledge, which saves on using Kazooie quite a bit here. I did unfortunately have to use Kazooie to shoot down 3 of the 7 icicles from the ceiling to make a path to the glide move, but by shooting the second icicle and then shooting every other icicle, which is 3 in total, you can easily jump from icicle to the other side. We finally made it to the last world in the game, and these are the Jiggies I collected. The Jiggy from defeating Minji Jinjo, which you can beat just by rolling into, which makes the fight a bit more fun. The Jiggy inside the trash can, which required Kazooie to activate the switch to go inside and then beating the minigame. This also required learning the Wing Whack move in Jolly Roger's Lagoon. I had to use Kazooie to dive underwater to collect the Globo here, but from there transformed into the bee and collected the Jiggy from defeating all the eyeball plants. The Jiggy from Zoa's Nest, which is also collected as the bee. The Jiggy from Super Stash's combination, which requires 4 Clockwork Kazooie eggs, one of which required flying to reach. The Jiggy from the Jelly Castle, which did not require Kazooie. And the Jiggy from the Cheese Wedge, which involved using Kazooie to hatch an egg, revealing the Floatus Floatium creature, which I'll just refer to as a floater from now on, allowing Banjo to float over to learn the Sack Pack move. This Jiggy also requires a build drill to collect a seed, flying to an island to plant the seed, and then hatching another egg to birth a floater, which required the clamor boots and gliding to get to, so that Banjo could float over to the island himself and get up the Cheese Wedge after Mumbo makes it rain. At this point, I had 67 Jiggies, and decided to shift my attention from hunting Jiggies to hunting Jinjos. I needed 2 more brown Jinjos to get another Jiggy, and only 1 more red Jinjo. And I had to travel across the worlds hunting them down since, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, Jinjo colors are random. The one brown Jinjo was on the top of the circus tent in Witchy World, which I did manage to just walk up onto using the tent rope, but unfortunately I couldn't get myself to reach the Jinjo, so I had to backflip to grab the gondola rope and fall from above to collect the Jinjo. The last brown Jinjo was in the Seaweed Temple of Jolly Roger's Lagoon, which I thought would require using Kazooie 3 times, twice for the spring pads and once to backflip to reach the Jinjo. But I found a way to avoid all of this. By using the split pad in town, I could take Banjo and warp to Big Fish Cavern, where there is another entrance to Seaweed Temple, an entrance that takes you to the top floor, bypassing the spring pads. And then from there, Banjo has no problem reaching the Jinjo. The final red Jinjo was in Terrydactyland and required diving in the water and using the Talon Torpedo to open the gate, which from there I just used Banjo to swim and grab. Now I had 69 Jiggies, and only needed 1 more to unlock the Hagwon fight. And there was 1 Jiggy I hadn't collected yet that doesn't involve Kazooie at all. 1 Jiggy that is the hardest to collect in the game, and one I was saving for last. If you've ever played Banjo Tooie, then you know exactly the Jiggy I'm talking about. It's none other than the infamous Canary Mary race in Cloud Cuckooland. This Jiggy is so bad that I even made a video 2 years ago specifically on it, and it's a Jiggy I've never collected in almost my 30 years of gaming. But today, I have no choice. I need to collect this Jiggy. For my first attempt, I wanted to try the intended way, just pure button mashing. And it went horribly. So horribly that I knew I had to bring out the big guns. A common strategy for beating Canary Mary is using a spoon. So, I quickly went to my kitchen, pulled out my favorite spoon, and used that spoon to slide back and forth over the A button as fast as possible in my second attempt. And that also failed horribly, even more so when I was button mashing. I needed something more powerful. So I went into my bathroom and pulled out my electric toothbrush. And with the toothbrush on full blast, I repeatedly slid the toothbrush back and forth over the A button. Perhaps not the most sanitary, and definitely not fair, but I didn't care, because it worked effortlessly, and I destroyed Canary f***ing Mary. All that was left was the Hague 1 fight. To get there, I had to use the claw boots to walk up this wall, then had to use Kazooie to glide over the pool of acid and again to activate the switch. And as for the battle itself, at minimum, it requires using Kazooie 41 times. Grenade eggs, of course, are the best eggs to use in the battle as it does 3 damage to Grunty, and she starts with 100 health. But every time Grunty takes 10 damage, the fight stops so she can ask a question, where answering the question right makes the battle a bit easier. So, assuming you're using grenade eggs, you need to hit her with 4 to take her health down by 10. You will also need to use 2 clockwork Kazooie eggs to destroy the 2 batteries. When Grunty gets down to 30 health, you can keep firing eggs until her health goes down to 1, where the fight will stop for her clip, and this takes 10 grenade eggs. Then, 1 final egg to finish her off.
That takes the total Kazooie count up from 153 to 194, which is Wooper's Pokedex number. If you made it this far in the video, please comment Wooper in the comments, just to confuse everyone else.
But yeah, there you have it.
Kazooie needs to be used 194 times to beat Banjo Tooie.
It's very likely possible to bring this number down lower, as I'm sure there are plenty of creative tricks I'm not aware of or just couldn't pull off. And of course, the jinjo colors being random will also have an impact on the total. If you like this video or the channel and want to support even more, then please consider giving the video a thumbs up and subscribing and commenting. We're also on Patreon if you want to support even more. And on that note, I want to give a big shout out to our Patreons.
Doggo Jaco, Daniel Garrett, Logan Buchanan, Alexander Thompson, Nolan Filter, Marcus Vandergeg, Real Backfish, Rebecca Lyons, Dragoon, Dr. Nook, Leburb, Puddles Megan, General Juicer, Omo, Fossil, Koi 13, Darman, Ryan Level, and Anarchist Kale.